Reading 109 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 3. Great Animal House, February 14th, 1948. Commentary on Habits. Work idea. The work says we must think in a new way to begin to change ourselves. The work teaches that after a certain age, we are nothing but a mass of acquired habits in every center. Habits in thinking center, habits in emotional center, habits in sex center, habits in moving center, and habits in instinctive center. All these habits keep us asleep because the centers cannot work, and so we pass our existences, not as we like, but as these habits dictate, and wonder why our lives are not what we expected. We do not even realize that they are habits. We are these habits, without seeing or knowing that this is the case. At the same time, everyone is quite sure that they could easily change if they wished to. This form of imagination assists, like all other forms of imagination, in keeping us asleep. Now, if our centers were not overlaid by these habits, we would hear what they say to us about every occasion. But as we are, centers do not speak to us. Commentary. The above was said originally in connection with the necessity of studying the construction of ourselves. We have to learn something about our machinery, in this case our habits. But of course, we do not believe we have a machinery. People usually think that habits only refer to minor bodily habits. They do not understand that their intellectual center, what they think by, is full of mechanical habits, and that their feelings, emotions, which belong to emotional center, are also mechanical habits of feeling, habits of emotion. In other words, the intellectual center and emotional center are not awake, but overspread by habits. Let us take the intellectual center. Most people do not think, but have opinions they have heard. These opinions can become habitual. That is, habits of the mind. Now, if a man, a woman, begins to awaken a little and sees the necessity of thinking for themselves, they will find that there are so many acquired and borrowed opinions and traditions filling their thinking center that they have absolutely no idea how to begin to think. And of course, for the purposes of nature, which man asleep serves the world over, it is contrary to nature's interest that anyone should really think. I suppose that if an animal began to think, say a horse, a lot of trouble would start, quite apart from the trouble I have always had in connection with horses. But just consider if animals could really think. And also conceive if we all could really think for ourselves instead of following opinions, slogans, prejudices, traditions, catchphrases, and even the last thing we read. Why, if we all could really think for ourselves, purely, we could live in a new world. But as we are, we think from acquired opinions, borrowed ideas, from what we have been taught is right, and so on, according to our upbringing, our class, our education, our inner hatreds, jealousies, and revenges. Now, as Gurdjieff said once, such a man does not think, it thinks, not he himself, and so he lives and dies without ever having thought. In another connection, he said, we must try to awaken the intellectual center first of all. That is, it is necessary to begin to think for oneself. This work is to make a man, a woman, think, and think in a quite new way. And on many occasions, Ouspensky said in so many words, why ask me always what, say, is exactly the difference between self-observation and self-remembering? It is not for me to explain. You must see for yourselves. Try to observe. Try to remember yourselves. You must begin to think for yourselves. This work is to make you think. Think what you are. Think what you want. Think indeed why you exist at all. Only by beginning to think can you change your life. Do you want your life to repeat itself just as it is? If so, do not above all even try to think. Just go on with your opinions. But then everything will recur just as it has happened already, and you will have to repeat your life exactly as before. Now, this interested me very much. I had up to then believed that to change anything in oneself, it was necessary to give up this or that physical habit, such as smoking, and so on. I had never realized that in order to change anything in oneself, one has to begin to think in a new way, and that unless there were some change in thinking, nothing else could be changed in oneself. That is, one had to start at the top, in the mind, before anything else could alter. So tonight, I am going to try to show you what this means. It is so very important an idea in this work, and also, in fact, in all esoteric teaching, as in the Gospels. Understand, then, that one cannot change oneself unless the mind changes. As long as you have the same mental attitudes, prejudices, opinions, and so on, you cannot begin to change. Try as you like, and you will remain the same unless your whole point of view, your whole way of thinking changes first. To change, Ouspensky said, you must change your attitudes first. Now let us speak first of what is said about the key to self-change in that extraordinary production called the Gospels. Notice how the whole idea of self-change, inner self-evolution, begins with one magical word. This word in the Greek is metanoia. Many have heard me speak of this word in connection with the work, and I do not think that what was said can be repeated enough. The introductory word to the Gospels and all their inner psychological teaching is this word, metanoia, which is wrongly translated as repent, and which really means change your mind. In other words, it means think in a new way. Meta equals beyond, and voia equals mind. So the word metanoia means think beyond your mind, and that is equivalent to what this work, which is esoteric Christianity, indicates when it teaches that in order to change we must think in a new way. That strange figure, John the Baptist, clad in skins, of whom Christ said that the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he, but that of men born of women, he was the greatest. This strange figure taught two things in conjunction. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, which truly should be change your ways of thinking. Yes, but why? Because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. What does that signify? It signifies the same as what the work teaches. Can you find the parallel? Of course you can. What does the work teach about man? It says man is not the same. Many different kinds and degrees of man exist. Number 1, number 2, number 3. That is, moving instinctive man, emotional man, intellectual man. These, the work says, are mechanical men who will never understand each other and so form the circle of confusion of tongues, or Babel. It then speaks of higher categories of man. Number 4 man. That is, a man in whom all centers work, so that he is not a one-sided man, as, say, is a moving center man. Then it speaks of the circle of conscious humanity. Number 5 man. Number 6 man. And number 7 man. These form the kingdom of heaven. From this example, you will see that the work teaching about different categories of man makes you think in a new way. That is, if you understand the teaching. And if you have patience to follow me, you will see that the message of John the Baptist, the herald of the teaching of Christ, is the same message as this work gives, namely, think in a new way, and the circle of conscious humanity exists. That is, the kingdom of heaven. Nowadays, people wish to make heaven on earth. One must look around and consider what is happening. For mankind to change, for a better state of things, each man, each woman must begin to work on themselves and try to awaken from sleep. In such words did Gurdjieff many times indicate the conditions necessary for things to become better on this deep down and unimportant planet. As it is, everything happens in the only way it can happen. It looks as if man were doing, but only a conscious man can do. So everything happens in the only way it can happen. In this case, the theory of determinism is right. But since a man can change and become a balanced man, or even a conscious man, then, through his individual work, through his changing himself, others can change. And then things will not happen in the only way they can happen. One man, by work on himself, can change others, and others can change others, and so on. But if all people are asleep, if no one understands what to do to change themselves, then all things will go on in the only way they can do, deterministically. Now to return to the thinking center, or intellectual center, and to the question of thinking in a new way. When we hear that there are higher men, we reflect. When we hear that man was created, and created as an experiment in self-evolution, we reflect. When we hear that life on this planet is not in our interests, unless we try to awaken, we reflect. When we hear that we are mechanical people and belong to the circle of Babel, we reflect. When we hear that unless we change ourselves, everything will remain the same, we reflect. When we hear that our level of being attracts our life, we reflect. When we hear that if we remain as we are, everything will repeat itself just as it did before, we reflect. Do you, for instance, want to live the same life over and over again? The work says if you change nothing in yourself, your life will endlessly repeat. When you hear that on having any mental contact with the work and trying to make out for yourself what it is about, and so altering your previous so-called thinking, you may begin to alter your position in the totality of things. You reflect. To reflect means to bend your thinking back to yourself. Consider your life. Do you want things different, or do you want the recurrence of the same things? Everything repeats, as winter and summer. If you remain the same, you will experience the same. Surely, you can see this from day to day. But the work says it refers also to life after life, because everything is as a circle, and everything repeats. Now, when you begin to reflect in this way, you begin to think for yourself, and this is the starting point of self-change. You begin to become responsible for what you are. You begin to see that if you make no effort to change something of yourself, everything will repeat, day by day, and life by life. Have you ever seen a propaganda child? You cannot change it. It has fixed ideas. If one reflects on this, one begins to think in a new way. That is, one begins to think for oneself. Unless you yourself work on yourself, you will have the same over and over again. Do you wish this? I would say in my case, no. Then, what can possibly aid me? If I still internally consider, if I still submit myself to negative states without any struggle, if I identify with everything, with every thought and mood, then I certainly do not understand my life and its meaning on this earth. So I add, reflect on what this work teaches, because only by reflecting privately will it enter your mind and alter your mind, and that, this thinking in a new way, opens to each of you the possibility of changing your being. Retain the same mental attitudes, the same prejudices, the same unchallenged viewpoints, the same fixed ideas and opinions, and you cannot change anything in yourself. The mind must first change. Hence, it is said, Metanoia is the starting point. That is, change of mind must come before you can become a different man, a different woman. Now, all this talk is about intellectual center and changing it. For the work teaches that unless you begin to think in a new way, you can alter nothing, and everything will go as before. This work, intellectually, gives you the right thoughts and ideas that can connect you with higher centers. That is, make you receptive of another permanent, ancient order of truth. But do not for a moment think that that is all. You must begin to have not only right thinking, right knowledge, but right being. What is right being? Being is different from truth. Being is just like this. Good equals goodwill. Will belongs to being. What is charity? Charity in the Greek equals grace, graciousness. In the Gospel of John, it is said of Christ, "And we beheld him full of grace and truth." Notice, grace comes first. Just take your fanatical truth people and reflect.